And he says to me, "Thank you for being a leader." And I was totally confused.
Welcome to the LabVIEW experiment. I am your host, Sam Taggart from SAS Workshops. In my 15 years of working with and training developers, I've had the opportunity to conduct a lot of experiments. Over here, we believe in embracing failure as the essential learning experience that it is. And what better way to learn than from other people's mistakes? In this podcast, I talk to industry experts, colleagues, and friends about their failures and how they have turned them into future successes. So I'm here today with David Neal. Many of you in the library community might not know David, but does a lot of consulting and he's kind of active in the Microsoft world.
Yeah, I'm a Microsoft MVP. I've been in the Microsoft world for earlier in my career, but for the last 10 years or so, I've been more in the Node.js and JavaScript community.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't know much about Node.js and JavaScript other than that it's front-end web stuff for the most part, right? Although Node does back-end stuff too, is that?
Yeah, it's a way of using JavaScript on the back end.
Okay. See, I'm not a web developer, uh, so a lot of what LabVIEW developers do tends to be programs that are run on a desktop and interact with hardware. So how have you done any of that, and how does that compare to web development?
Oh yeah. So I got my start in my career building desktop apps using like C and Pascal, and then later Visual Basic. For many years, I built desktop apps with Visual Basic on for Windows PCs. And in the last 10 years, uh, I have also been working on desktop applications, but using a whole different stack of technologies, and that's Electron, which is essentially Node.js and Chrome. It's essentially a web application, but it's you couldn't tell the difference between it and a native desktop app. So that allows you to build cross-platform desktop applications that run on Windows, Mac, or Linux. So if you've ever seen an app like Visual Studio Code or the GitHub desktop client or um, Slack,
Yeah.
uh, those are all Electron applications. They are web apps that run on the desktop.
So to help me make sure I understand what you're saying, and for the audience, Electron basically just bundles a browser into your app, and then the browser is kind of cross-platform, and then your app is just basically HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or whatever that runs
Yeah.
Electron.
So Electron is two technologies. It's Node.js, which is cross-platform, and that's a way of running JavaScript as kind of like a back end application service. And then the front end is Chromium, which is the kind of extracted web view from the Chrome browser. So it's lighter than Chrome because it's just the web or the HTML rendering component for Chrome called Chromium.
Very cool. Yeah, one of the things in the LabVIEW world is creating user interfaces, and sometimes people in the LabVIEW world struggle to create good user interfaces. You know, you create them and they
Oh,
kind of,
yeah, I
and
imagine.
yeah, and so a lot of people have played with, right, back end and LabVIEW and then the front end in some sort of JavaScript or something if you want it to be a little nicer. So Electron
Yeah,
kind of like combines some of that. That's cool.
yeah. So I'm not a very good front end designer, although I've gotten better in as far as like design skills and things in recent years. But I've I'm way more comfortable building something in HTML and CSS and JavaScript and making it look good and work and functional and good user experience than I am using old school um, desktop widgets and components and things like that, whatever framework. So um, we could dive into that story a little bit. I tried before I started using Electron to use Xamarin, which, as you mentioned earlier, I come from a Microsoft stack of technology experience, and Xamarin is part of Microsoft now, but it was an open source .NET framework that people were using for building mobile applications that are cross-platform. So you use .NET C Sharp to build apps that run on either iOS or Android. And it was a, very popular uh, way for building mobile applications. And as a kind of a byproduct, they also built a desktop version. You could build desktop apps with Xamarin, and I tried, but the experience was just not great at all. The UI components, you had to drop down to native OS, Mac and Linux and Windows to do any of the visual stuff, and so you were having to work a lot harder at building something that was cross-platform. The code, the underlying code was shared, and that was like the only benefit. All the front end work was was really difficult, if not impossible, at least in my view. And so, me being a web developer, Electron was a much better fit.
So I haven't done any C sharp stuff, but I have used Python, and I've tried to make some GUIs with tkinter and PySimple GUI and Qt and some of those things, and it's challenging. Um, the one nice thing LabVIEW does have, like its GUI stuff is not like super polished. It looks old, but you get it kind of for free. So like in Python, so yeah, I don't know how much you know about LabVIEW yet, but Python and C Sharp and everything, it's all text based. And LabVIEW is this like graphical programming language, which is a whole other paradigm. So you have two parts. You have like a block diagram, which is basically where you draw like a flow chart. And then every function also has a front panel, which is where the controls and indicators, so like the inputs and outputs go. And they're all graphical.
Okay.
So you get this like graphical panel for every function, which is kind of cool.
Hmm.
But
Okay.
it just kind of looks a little dated, and like there's some issues, like it doesn't really handle SVGs very well, and it doesn't scale very well. Like if you try to do it on a high resolution monitor and you're resizing windows and stuff. So
Yeah.
it lacks a little bit of that polish. So that's usually why people are trying to go with other things, because you kind of you create them and they either have that like old school Windows look from like Windows 95 or something where it's like very boxy looking, or you just have like these very distinct LabVIEW kind of controls and indicators, and it's just obvious that it's made in LabVIEw. And it would be really nice to make it and just have it look kind of seamless, or like the native OS or something.
Yeah.
So, but I'm an engineer, so like I'm always very utilitarian. Like I don't aesthetics are not as important to me as like, does it work? Does it have all the information I need? And like as long as it's got that.
Right. Exactly.
And
Get the job done.
I also, the one thing I'm really big on UI stuff though is more like I would call it more UX. It's like the flow through the program, like that kind of has to work, right? If you have to like click on one tab and set three or four things, and then click on another tab and set a couple things, and then switch back and forth all the time, that doesn't really work so well for
Yeah.
me. So cool. So some of our listeners might be wondering why I have you on a LabVIEW podcast, since you're not necessarily a LabVIEW programmer. David has graciously volunteered. Well, actually, we are paying him a small fee, but he's going to be our keynote speaker at GDevCon, and he's also giving a workshop. So I was hoping maybe you could tell some people about your workshop, since many of them may not know what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've been in tech now for going on 30 years, and I've been on a bit of a roller coaster journey of going back and forth between as an individual contributor, building applications, to leading teams, to being uh, having titles like director of engineering or VP of whatever. And um, I've gone through these cycles of in my career where I've been promoted to some type of team lead or leadership position. And earlier in my career, that's it's not really what I wanted. Like I chose to, or it was given to me as like a a promotion, but it didn't feel like a promotion to me. It felt like punishment, because I didn't really want to do that kind of work. I'd rather just write code and continue to focus on uh, you know the tasks and the code at hand. I am not uh, a an outgoing people person by nature. So there's a lot of skills that I had to learn, and I was reluctantly learn them through all these kind of iterations until one point in my career, I was like, I kind of had a light bulb moment where some advice that someone tried to give me a long time ago about being able to accomplish more by empowering and enabling people around you that started to make sense. Like um, I need to do more than just focus on me. I realize that I've been pretty selfish in my my worldview of things that I want to do and things that I want to try to control, and now I realize that I have opportunity, and whether I choose to or not, my behavior affects the people that I work with, the people that are around me, and I need to I need to be more intentional about how I treat people around me and how I engage with them, how I collaborate with them, and how I um, try to be more of a team player and worked together to be uh, to accomplish something greater than I can accomplish on my own. And so all these kind of thoughts and reflections over my career and things started to accumulate into some uh, soft skill, if you will, talks that I would give at conferences. A lot of it was around some keynotes and things that I would talk about uh, leadership for the reluctant leader, and that seems to resonate with a lot of people in tech because they've had similar journeys where they've been promoted to team lead or management position, and didn't really either didn't want to be there or weren't given the support that they needed to be successful in that role. And unfortunately, that happens a lot where people get promoted and you're kind of thrust into this new role, and you're not given a mentor, you're not given training, you're not given any kind of support or resources to be successful. It's like, you know, you do good work and okay, now you're in charge of some people. Like, oh, okay. um, and that's kind of a recipe for everybody being miserable. So um the keynote and the workshop is kind of like the culmination of many years of reflection and kind of trying to impart some of that wisdom and experience that I've accumulated over the years to share with others that I believe that regardless of where you are in hierarchy of your organization or what kind of title you have, whether you manage anyone or not, I believe that you have opportunity and obligation to make a positive impact on other people around you, that anyone can be a leader in your organization, regardless of position or title.
Yeah, no, that's pretty powerful idea. So, yeah, I think that peer leadership is kind of just like setting the example in some ways can go a long way.
Yeah.
Actually, like that.
So there was kind of an aha moment for me many years ago. I was working for a startup company and we had less than 100 employees, and I had been like the director of software engineering for another company prior to that. And so I was in this role where I was uh, doing a relatively new thing in the industry at that time. That was developer advocacy. And I was spending a lot of time going to conferences and events, and I was supporting our APIs and doing SDKs and just a bunch of developer advocacy and developer relations stuff. And I was in a one-on-one with the CTO of the company, and he says, "Thank you." And he says to me, "Thank you for being a leader." And I was totally confused. I'm like, what do you mean? I don't have a team. It's just me. I'm the am I supposed to be managing somebody? And he says, no, what I'm, you are a leader in our company. When the ideas that you have, the people listen to you when you speak. There's you bring a lot of experience and wisdom to the discussions that we have, and he just gave all these different um, ways that I was acting as a leader in the organization, and it was like, wow, all these years I've thought of leadership as only being for people who are in management positions. And that was part of that transition for me of like, hey, I can, now that I understand it better, I can do more of that. I can recognize that I have opportunity to make a positive impact on someone else or another team in the organization. Um, where I see that they could benefit from something that I can do for them or coach them to do.
Yeah, and you can make that even broader, right? Because you could be a general advocate within the community, the larger community and not even like the Microsoft programmers or the Java programmers, but just programming in general or tech in
Yep.
general. So yeah, that's really empowering. But I totally get your thing about being a reluctant leader. I remember being in several meetings when I was a young employee, and my boss was constantly like grooming me to want to be a manager, and I was like, why would I want to do that? Like I don't want to.
Right.
But to me, what I never actually made it into management. I kind of started off doing my own consulting thing. But to me, like I view the soft skills thing, like dealing with people and stuff, as kind of an engineering challenge in a way, right? So I like challenges, I like
Yeah.
problem solving. So like dealing with people, to me, it was sales and marketing and that side of things, and just trying to like figure out the psychology of people and what causes people to buy and what motivates people. And one of the interesting things that I really got into Freakonomics. I don't know if you've ever read that book, but
I
it's
haven't read it. I've heard several people talk about it.
well, it talks about how basically like if you want to understand why something happens, you should follow the incentives. And I think that comes in a lot in programming and stuff. For example, right, if you have a programming team and you incentivize individual behavior and individual metrics, well, that kind of ruins some of the teamwork, right? Because, it's I'm gonna like try to make sure my metrics are really high and I don't care about everybody else's metrics. Whereas really, like
Yeah.
if you measure the entire team, then everybody's pulling in the same direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a challenge in every organization is what, now more than ever, companies and organizations are like trying to figure out what are the things we need to measure, what are our goals, and there's all these different names for it, right? KPIs and OKRs, and I don't even know, there's just all these spreadsheets and models and things that people are trying to come up with to like, like you said, incentivize parts of your work. And goals are great, but the thing, anything that you try to measure, I don't know what there's some kind of
Law, yeah.
term for it, yeah, law or whatever. It's like whatever you measure, that's going to get skewed. That's going to be that's going to get more attention, and it's just people have a tendency of gaming the system. It's like
Yeah.
whatever the system is, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to get rewarded based on these metrics being, these numbers being higher. I'm just going to game the system to make to do the least amount of work or whatever to make that happen.
Well, it starts
Um,
out with good intentions, right? So, like for example, if you run like a customer service thing, right, you might say, "Well, we want to get people's problems solved quickly. We want to get them like in and out and off the phone, right?" Like, so,
right.
so instead of measuring, you just measure how long each phone call takes. Well, then you get somebody who's like, "Oh, I'm at my 3 minutes. Oh, sorry," hangs up, right? Or the customer and they have to call back or whatever because I'm going to keep my metrics under like 3 minutes a call or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is looking at only one metric, right? So like you've got to look at multiple metrics. So if you did the time of call, but then also at the end you give a customer satisfaction survey, then you would probably catch that, right? Because the customer satisfaction is going to go way down if you keep hanging up on them after 3 minutes or something. So
Yeah.
yeah, that is definitely a challenge. The other thing I'm big on is like I feel like you can monitor stuff without actually making it like a goal or a target. Like just like monitor what's going on and then like for example, like if you just, everybody says, oh, lines of code or whatever, but like if you monitor like how often people are committing to the repository, or how many lines of code are getting added, and all of a sudden you see like a dip or something, well, like that might be something worth investigating. Why is there a sudden dip? Did something happen? Did something in the organization change? Is somebody just having a bad day or a bad week? Do they have some kind of like personal issue going on that you should, go talk to them about? So I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of important to kind of have some idea of like what your normal baseline is, and if it suddenly deviates.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a better way of looking at things, like, because that is connecting with the person, the people, not just focusing on the output or the values or the whatever you're measuring, but though using those as indicators as to how the health of your organization, the health of the people that you work with.
Yeah, I think of it kind of like looking at the speedometer, right? Like you're not trying to go exactly this, you just kind of want to know where you're at any given time, right? Because like maybe the roads are icy and you want to go a little slower, or maybe it's flat and straight, maybe you go a little faster or whatever, but like at least knowing where you are on that curve is good.
Yep.
Yeah.
David Neal will be the keynote speaker for GDevCon NA 2024, and he'll be giving a pre-conference workshop titled Leadership for the Reluctant Leader. That will be the day before the conference in Golden, Colorado. You will walk away from this workshop with a fresh perspective on leadership, excited about your potential, and equipped with the tools to help you reach your full potential and have a lasting impact on others. You can get tickets at gdevconna.org or by the link in our show notes.
So maybe people can tell if you're watching the video, you can see the fancy title behind David and the avatar there. You're also quite an artist. So how'd you get into that?
So this is a story I love to tell because it's now part of everything that I do. But me being I can I can safely call myself an illustrator today, and I didn't. There wasn't that. It hasn't been that long that I could say I am an artist or I am an illustrator. So when I was in school, I doodled on some of my papers. Sometimes that got me in trouble with some of my teachers. And I had fun when I was in school, just creating little cartoon characters and stuff like that. But it never went beyond that. And then after I was through with high school, I didn't do any drawing or doodling or anything like that. Occasionally, if I did anything, it would be a smiley face that went on uh, like one of my kids' birthday cards or something. Um, but there were several moments as I was getting involved in the developer community where I would go to someone's talk or I'd see something that they had commissioned from another artist that was like, it really got my attention when I saw people with a cartoon avatar or someone who was using cartoon characters in one of their presentations or just some kind of illustration artwork and or graphics. And I thought, wow, that's so cool. I wish I could do that. I went up to a speaker one time early on and said, you know, where did you get that? How did you do your presentation with these cool comic characters?" And he says, "Oh, well, I have a friend who's a comic book artist, and I commissioned some artwork from him, and he created these different characters and different poses that I could use in um, my talk." And on one hand, I thought that was amazing. On the other hand, I was kind of disappointed to hear that, you know, he had to spend money to make that happen. It's like, well, I can't justify spending a bunch of money. I don't have a comic book artist friend, that I can get something done cheaply. So I just, it was just another seed that was planted. But then around 2015, had given hundreds of talks by then, at all these different meetups and conferences, and I was feeling kind of burned out. Like I had some measure of success in, you know, my speaking ability and presentation style. I was getting good feedback from folks and from the events, but I felt like I just wasn't being effective. Like I didn't think anybody was coming away from my talks being very inspired or encouraged or it's like, hey, that was a good talk, but I'm not actually going to do any of the things that you talked about. you know, right? That's the way I felt. I don't know if that was 100% true or not, but I was getting burned out, and I felt like I just was hitting a wall. I wasn't getting any better as a speaker, and I just wasn't. I was getting ready to maybe take a year off or something, and have an existential crisis. So I was on YouTube trying to find ways to get better as a speaker, and I came across a video by a guy named Dan Rome, who's written several books around using hand-drawn illustrations. And one of them is called Show and Tell. And the name of this video on YouTube is called Show and Tell. And it's like a 45-minute presentation to a group of people at Google on how using simple things like lines, arrows, shapes, and stick figures, you can make your presentations far more engaging and far more interesting and entertaining, and that people will, be captivated by whatever it is that you're presenting. And I watched this video and I rewatched it several times. Like, this is amazing. I I think I can do this. I was like, stick figures, yeah, lines and arrows, basic shapes, squares, circles, triangles. I think I can do that. And so I had this presentation that I was a brand new talk that I was going to give, and I decided I'm gonna do this. I had this old iPad and a cheap $5 stylus, and I thought I'm gonna do 4 or 5 slides using using some of these illustrations. I instantly fell in love with it, and I started creating all these illustrations, and they were terrible. They were like very poorly drawn stick figures and crude drawings, but I mean they looked like cave paintings. They were awful. And I stand up in front of the audience to give this talk for the first time, and within 5 seconds, I knew it was a game changer. The audience was I'd never had an audience that was that engaged, who were smiling and laughing at stuff that was coming up on the screen because it was so terrible. And I was able to tell my story the way that I wanted to tell it. I didn't have to compromise with clip art or use a bunch of bullet points or anything. I could just tell my story. And I fell in love with doing illustrations. And so I knew I couldn't create a new talk every week. So I needed another excuse for drawing. So I started drawing silly stuff to post on social media. And these were crude, terrible drawings, but humorous tech related stuff, dad jokes, different things. And over time, my as I learned as an engineering approach, I would look at something and say, okay, based on the skills that I have right now, what little skill I have, how could I draw that idea? And how can I break it down into basic shapes that I can draw and color in. And over time, that engineering mentality helped me to do look at an object, look at something, destructure it in a way that was like, oh, I can compose these shapes and things and turn it into something that looks recognizable. And my skills got better and better over time, and now illustration work is part of everything that I do, and it's yeah, I love doing it.
Yeah, no, and to tie this back for the audience, back to the GDevCon conference, we usually give the presenters gifts every year, and this year we decided to give them all avatars by David. So if you see our marketing and you see a bunch of avatars, that's all David. And I'm sure if you like them, you can go. He has a website. You can go and you can commission one if you want to join everybody else.
Yeah, so the avatar thing is something that again, it was kind of like I saw people who had these cool avatars and like, man, I wish I could do that. And I I first started experimenting on my own avatar. Like I would um draw a cartoon of myself to use in my presentations and to use on social media. And I eventually got up the courage to start drawing other people. I would draw, like people that I respected, or as a gift, I would just draw some silly cartoon of them and say, here you go. And some people liked it. Some people, like, oh, thanks. And, it never saw the light of day, because it took a long time before I was, you know, decent at creating likenesses of people.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's turned into for a while I was doing lots and lots of avatars for people on social media. Of course, now there's AI that's kind of creeping into to places, and uh, uh, that's an interesting world we live in today with AI stuff.
Yeah, we'll see where that goes. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know that I have enough information. So I don't know. I'm, a lot of people are concerned about AI taking the place of coders and stuff, and I'm not too worried about that yet.
I'm not worried about that.
I think at best it will be a helper, and it can be a helper, and I'm sure there are ways that it can help you. But like to completely replace a human, I feel like there's some judgment there that's really hard to replicate with AI, and I don't think that's going to happen. And also like the communication and just figuring out what all the requirements are and like that whole process. Like maybe if you could come up with a perfect requirements document that exactly matched what the person needed, then hand it off, maybe that would work. But like we've been trying to get perfect requirement documents for like the past however many years, and that's never happened. So
Yeah.
not going to change anytime soon. Um, there was something else. Oh, so I first met you at DevTernity conference a few years ago, and I saw your workshop, and we were talking about the presentation with the drawing. I did actually, you inspired me. The very next presentation I did after that, I did it all hand drawing, and it did go
Oh,
over
cool.
really well. And then for whatever reason, I got away from it. So you're reminding me, I have a presentation that I'm doing in a couple days, and I should go back. The nature of the presentation requires a lot of screenshots of like code and stuff. So I've got to figure out.
Sure.
I'm thinking I've got a few places where I could probably insert a little drawing or something. So I'm going to go do that. I think that'll be
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. The technical talks are more challenging than what I've usually ended up doing to incorporate illustrations and fun stuff into technical talks has been like having a stick figure or cartoon character on the screen that's pointing out stuff,
Yeah.
like pointing out code or pointing out a process, or just having like I've got a technical slide up that's describing a workflow or a process, and then I'll use like little hand-drawn icons to represent different steps of that process or whatever, just to make it, more visually engaging.
Yeah, you remind me because I took a bunch of screenshots and I went in, I have like Snagit or something. And I was like drawing boxes and arrows on stuff. And I was like, now that I'm thinking about it, next time I do that, I can just circle them, like, put it up on a PDF on a tablet or something and circle it that way. And that
Yeah,
just adds a little more. I do feel like the hand-drawn stuff, it does add something. I think at the very least, it shows that the person put a little bit more extra effort and time into their presentation, I think. A little bit more,
yeah,
like, it's got that like artistic side to it.
yeah. I think, there's great tools. We've had great tools for a long time around like drawing. Like there was Visio. I remember doing a lot of Visio stuff
Yeah.
back in the day of like, projects and diagrams and workflows and, showing different processes and work things. But they they look sterile or clinical or, maybe a little bit too corporate or something. It's like there's no fun in that. There's no it's like you know it's almost as like looking at a chart that's just boring. It'll put you to sleep just as much as anything else. But you look at a hand-drawn arrow, a hand-drawn, icon or shape or something, and it's so much more visually interesting. There's a quote that I use in some of my talks from a speaker in the Microsoft community. His name's Arthur Doler, and he talks a lot about psychology and uh, brain stuff and um, uh, disorders, and he talks about a lot of interesting things and how it relates to us in tech. But one of the talks he gives is on how our brains learn, how we learn new stuff, and how we can kind of get better at learning new things. And one of his quotes is, "Our brains love to be surprised." That's what, and that it's like, as soon as he said that, it's like, that's it. That is the thing that makes hand drawn stuff so interesting, is that when you see that for the first time, your brain like, I've never seen that before. What is that? And you start studying it and trying to see the detail, and it's visually interesting, and that's part of what the trick that makes it so much more engaging.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because you're so used to seeing the normal PowerPoints. And I mean, I think anytime you see PowerPoint, like adding some sort of visualization is like key. Because like so many times I see people give presentations, particularly technical presentations, it's just walls of text and they're just reading them. And I'm just like,
Oh man, death by PowerPoint.
yeah, at least having some pictures. I don't know. I went through this thing. So I used to be president of this Explorers Club of Pittsburgh thing. And it was like a mountaineering rock climbing club. And the guy who ran the meetings before me, he would always do presentations, he would do PowerPoint, but he would put up like these pictures, like amazing pictures of like mountains and snow and rock climbing and stuff.
Yeah,
But what I realized was that everybody was getting distracted by the pictures. So like I took over after him as president, and I would start doing that, and everybody's paying attention to the pictures. Nobody's listening to what I was saying. So I just went
yeah,
simple, and I literally turned off the PowerPoint, and I just had note cards, and I went with the note cards. And I think it was something similar in that it was so different because people weren't used to not having the PowerPoint, and
yeah.
it definitely made people pay attention. So yeah, I wonder if that would fly at one of our tech conferences. Just get up there with a couple note cards and just talk and not show anything. I don't know. Maybe I'll try that.
It might. Yeah. I do think there's something to be like, that's what I did before I started drawing. Was I was finding these beautiful photos or something that to
Mhm.
display as part of to make the slides more visually entertaining or whatever. And I think there is something where yeah, I believe you're right. People will sit there and study that photo and like imagine where did this photo take place? There's I don't know what all may be going
Yeah.
through somebody's mind, but they're looking at the photo and not thinking about the what you're saying or the content is and the photo is just loosely related. It may
Yeah.
not have anything to do with the talk, right? Or what you're trying to say. You're like you got a beautiful photo of rock climbing, and you're trying to talk about uh, the challenges of accomplishing something hard, right? And all people are paying attention to is the the details of the photo. They're not listening to you talk about the challenges that you're trying to incorporate. And so I think that's one of the pros and cons of using beautiful photos. Um, and I can't say that some of my hand drawn illustrations aren't distracting. I can see that too, but I do think because it is so specific
Yeah.
to the topic that I'm talking about that they can't help but associate that visual with the thing that I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, also too, like your drawings are like you were talking about like simple shapes and stuff. So they're generally not super complicated. So I think that kind of helps like the stick figures and stuff. Just
Yeah,
like, yeah, yeah, it catches your eye a little bit. Yeah, you kind of want to find out what's going on, but I don't think it distracts too much. So
yeah,
and like you said too, sometimes like I need to start maybe drawing stuff for my blog posts too, because like I do a blog post and I'm like trying to find an image that looks like what I want. And it's like you go through the stock image sites and there's never exactly what I have in my mind. And then
right.
I guess you could go down the AI road and like try that, but I don't even know that that would get you exactly what you have in your mind either. So
Yeah. Yeah, and you can kind of tell when something's AI generated, and that becomes kind of like cliche or when I see that, it may I do an eye roll, kind of
yeah,
reaction to it. It's like, oh yeah, they they use AI to generate this. Like it's almost like discredits them for what they're trying to do.
yeah, it feels like laziness. I don't know, maybe it's not, but that's kind of the way I feel about it. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not embracing the AI thing as much as maybe some other people are. I- yeah, it was very interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine who was talking about posting on social media and stuff, and now they have this like you write a paragraph on LinkedIn that you're going to post, and it says rewrite with AI, and he's like, I want to write in my voice. Why would I want to write in somebody else's voice? I thought
Yeah.
that was very interesting. Just that like individuality and art or the artistry of it of like I don't know. Very interesting. I do have to say, I did use it once to write an email because I had to write an email and it was like one of these things where like it was like a difficult topic and I was like, I don't really know how to say this or whatever. And I didn't copy exactly what it had, but I like looked at it and I was like, okay, yeah, it kind of makes sense. But
Yeah.
that's honestly like the only thing I've used it for so far. So, but very cool. So one thing I like to ask everybody who's on the podcast is to tell me about an experiment and what you learned from it. So that obviously the name of the podcast is the Lab You Experiment. So I want to encourage people to go out and do things and experiment and try things. And part of that is being okay with things not turning out the way you thought they would. So
Yeah. Well, I have already talked about several experiments. Talked about the experiment of doing hand-drawn illustrations, and that just one of the benefits of doing that was, when you're in school, and I didn't realize this until later, but when you're taking notes and you're thinking, you're listening to the teacher, you're writing, you might write a word or a phrase down in your notebook as part of your notes, and then when you go back to study for that test, you you could read that word or that phrase, and you can immediately remember so much more information about what that note represents, right? There's something special about the act of handwriting a note that helps connect that with your brain and with, remembering and learning. And I found that when I did hand drawn illustrations, I would be drawing for a slide and I'd be thinking about all the things that I wanted to talk about on that slide. And when I would give a presentation, I was surprised to learn that I didn't have any trouble remembering the things that I wanted to talk about. It's like help to reinforce the story of what I wanted to say. So it made me more conversational, and that was just a surprise benefit that I didn't didn't know would happen.
That's a great take, yeah, because a lot of times what I use my slides to kind of prompt me on what to say, like because I don't want to put a wall of text up there and read it, and I don't want to have a bunch of notes under the slide because then I'm like just reading it, even though if the audience can't see it. So I just put like a couple bullet points, but I always feel like I'm putting too much on the slide anyway. I would rather just have like one image or one or two images and then just be able to talk about it and not forget everything. So maybe that's an
Yeah,
interesting thing to try.
yeah. Another experiment was how I got involved in the developer community in the first place. Like I was I've been working from home part time or full time for the last 20 years. And I was working for a company where I was working from home full time, and I was feeling kind of, well, I was very disconnected and wasn't getting a whole lot of um, interaction with other developers, and I was just getting, I knew something was missing, and there was a, a regional conference that was happening, and I thought, well, it's not too expensive. I'll go and do that. And the thing that I kept hearing at this event, one, the event was amazing. I learned a lot, and I met several people. And me being an introvert, it was kind of an interesting thing to meet other developers in my community. And but the message I kept hearing was uh, get involved, go to meetups, go, this is a one-time event, but there's opportunities for you to continue to meet and do other things in your community. So I started going to some meetups in my area, and one thing led to another, and I ended up being part of the leadership for one of those user groups. And that led to me, someone encouraging me to give a talk on some things that I was working on. And that was terrifying and uh, scary. And one of the, it's like, why would I do this? But, I felt like this is something I've always wanted to do. I just never had the courage to do it before. But when I finally got up the courage to do it, I knew I was terrible at it. Like I knew that I hadn't done a good job as a speaker, but the feedback that I received from people was disproportionately great, compared to the quality of the presentation that they had just been subjected to. And so it was like, oh, that wasn't so bad. I didn't die. I would like, maybe I'll try this again. And that led to, so looking back over the last 10 years, the people I've been able to meet, the opportunities I've had to travel around the world, to be part of different conferences and events, and the friendships that I've made, connections I've made, I would have never imagined that kind of outcome. And that was an experiment that definitely was had amazing side effects, and continues to pay dividends to this day. So I love to encourage people to give back to their community. It doesn't have to be speaking. There's lots and lots of different ways you can give back to your communities, but there's you can you never know if something that you say or do could be that catalyst for an opportunity or inspire someone on their journey. There's just yeah, just uncalculable benefits.
Yeah, what I hear a lot of times from people, and I have at least one friend who might recognize this when I say this, but he's always saying like, "Well, I would present, but I don't have anything interesting to present on. What do I know? Blah blah blah." And it's like,
Yeah,
even presenting on something that's like been presented on 100 times, there's always new developers coming along who maybe haven't seen those old presentations or don't know that little trick or
yeah,
whatever. And so, I think it's always worth doing those things and reiterating those things. And the other thing I always try to remember too is like there's this saying something like the better you know the basics, the more advanced you are. So like, everybody wants to do the latest flashy, shiny stuff, but sometimes just like I've seen some really good presentations on simple things like error handling or something, or like logging,
yeah,
or right. And sometimes it's just a new, fresh look at it. And it's, it seems
yeah,
kind of mundane, but then you're like, oh, wow, yeah, if you do this or that, it's really useful and it's a different take on it. So
yeah. Well, if you like watching sports teams, different games, a lot of times the teams that do the best are the ones that focus on the fundamentals, that focus on the basics, and go back to like really focusing on the very basic stuff. Um, but yeah, what you're describing is something I've heard lots and lots of times, and that is it's related to imposter syndrome. It's like
mhm.
I there's nothing, I can't do a better job than someone else on teaching this subject. Why would I do this? When there's better people, more qualified people to do this. And my argument against that is people love stories. They love personal stories of you know your journey. What got you into that technology? What are you interested about in that technology? What keeps you going? What keeps you motivated? What are the mistakes you've made? All those things are like terrifying to talk about, but they are the things that no one else has. No
Mhm.
one no one else on the planet has your story. And that's what people want to hear. They don't, if they want to learn how to do something, they'll go and learn how to do it on Google or Stack Overflow or use AI, to learn how to do the thing. They want to come to your talk because they want to hear your story.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. So we're at about time. Do you have anything else you want to add? Is there anything we didn't talk about?
We didn't talk about guitars. We didn't talk about
Huh?
coffee or bacon or
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, those are all important topics. So yeah, I see the guitars. You play in any bands or anything?
yeah. I've been playing uh, guitar since I was a teenager, and yeah, I love any and every opportunity to play.
Very cool. What's your favorite type of music?
Uh, I would have to say like instrumental guitar of all types. I'm a fingerstyle guitar player, so I love
Yeah.
all kinds of all there are lots of different genres, but some of my guitar heroes are like Phil Keaggy and Tommy Emmanuel and Chet Atkins, and folks who have done like instrumental albums who of virtuoso type
Yeah.
performances. And back in the days, Steve Vai and Joe Satriani and some of these shredder type guitar players were my heroes.
Cool. Yeah, I'm really into doing Travis picking type stuff.
Yeah.
That's kind of mine. Very cool. And coffee and bacon, just I guess you can't go wrong with that. I like.
No, it's you
Although
know
you can't
can't
drink too much coffee. I have figured that out, but there.
that I guess that's possible.
My parents, I don't know, man. Maybe this is a generational thing, but my parents used to drink a cup of coffee before they went to bed at night, and I don't know how the heck they did it. But
Yeah.
I drink
I
coffee after
don't.
like 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and like I can't sleep at night. So I just drink a whole bunch before then. So
Yeah.
all right, well, thank you very much. Been
Yeah.
great.
Thank you.
Yeah, and actually, before we go though, if anybody wants to find you, you will be at GDevCon NA, and they can take the
Yep.
workshop. They can listen to you talk at the keynote, and then you have a website, right? They look up Reverend.
Yeah.
That will get you.
Reverent Geek. Yeah,
Okay.
Reverend Geek. I'm Reverend Geek everywhere. ReverendGeek.com is my website. I'm Reverend Geek on all the different social media platforms. So yeah, I'd love to connect and get to know you.
Very good. Thank you. That's it for today's episode of the LabVIEW Experiment. Thanks for listening. If you have any comments or questions, head over to thelabuexperiment.com and drop me a note. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the LV Experiment.